Hello, hello. How you
Hello,
doing?
hello. Good. How are you?
I'm good, man. How's the games?
Doing pretty good. I've been running pretty good. The 1-2
Yeah.
sessions have been nice, and I have a couple of fun hands to talk to you about.
Cool. Where are you playing these? I forgot.
Morongo
Morongo.
at Palm
Morongo.
Springs with a 50 big blind structure. Max
Okay.
buy-in is 100, min buy-in's 40. So only 50 BBs.
1, 2, 50 VB. What's the rake on that?
It's pretty big. So let me actually check it online.
No,
The
it's okay.
I do know that they take $2 for every pot, and it increases by 5 when the pot balloons above $20.
Okay, so max 7. Wow, that's pretty big. Why do you play that game?
I don't have enough bullets at 1-3.
Okay.
I have more bullets at 1-2.
How rolled are you for 1, 2?
20 buy-ins?
That's okay. Yeah. That puts a lot of pressure if you go to 1, 3. Yeah, I can see why you're playing 1, 2. You got to move up to 1, 3 as soon as you can because
Yeah,
that
that
rake
rake is
is
gonna kill me.
really, yeah, yeah, yeah. How many sessions have you had since we spoke?
3 sessions?
3 sessions. How many hours do you play each sessions?
4 to 5.
Short sessions. All right, let's see.
First hand, uh, stack sizes are 40 big blinds effective, and I'm deep with around 100 big blinds. I'm in the small blind, 100 deep. But effective
Oh,
stack sizes around this table are 40 big blinds. I have ace 10 offsuit, ace 10 offsuit. So I have the ace of diamonds, 10 of clubs. I raise against 3 limpers to 15. Sorry, I'm
okay.
in the big blind.
You're in the big blind. So talk to me about why you chose 15.
Since there's only 3 limpers, I don't have to ISO very, very large. I'm seeing an opportunity to steal very, very easily here. I still have a lot of equity when called, and I can play post flop pretty easily against most players since current table dynamics is very honest post flop, very, very passive. Players aren't really leading into you post flop unless they have a pretty strong hand, range including second pair, top pair, even some third pair. Um, and most players are calling very, very light pre-flop and continuing with a very, very wide range on the flop and getting to the turn. So, in the
Okay.
worst case, if I whiff the flop, my thought process is on a very high connected board, or sorry, on a high card board like an ace high or king high board, I can barrel 2 streets on many scare cards and get them to fold most of their range, getting to the turn.
Now, these players, these limpers, are they typical very loose passive limp callers where they can
Very,
be
very
limping in
passive
there with
limp
value
callers.
hands?
No, not like the typical OMC that I'm playing against. Most of these are passive limp callers. They're usually going to be raising with a lot of their strong stuff, including their broadways, their strong pocket pairs of tens plus,
Okay.
um, playing very face up.
All right, perfect. All right. I like your size. I just wanted to hear your thought process on it. Normally, maybe I would go to 17, but 15 is essentially the same given the conditions.
Action folds over to the small blind player, and her play. My current table read of her is passive limp caller, um, raising a lot of her strong stuff, very, very face up. I've seen her shown down pocket queens once where she gave away a bet sizing tell pre-flop and raised to 20. So moving into this, I am just generally going to be very cautious when she chooses to continue to the post flop for a $15 open. This is usually representing some of her medium strength pocket pairs that want to see a flop, as well as some of her dominated king X and or ace X.
Okay, fair enough. What was
So
the flop?
she calls, the flop comes ace of hearts, king of hearts, nine of clubs. Sorry, ace of hearts, king of diamonds, nine of clubs.
Great flop for you, relatively.
Yeah, top pair, solid
Yeah.
kicker. So
Yep.
I start off with a range bet of one third pot.
What was the bet size? The pot is about
$10.
34, so $10. Okay. Why did you choose that size?
Looking for just a small range bet, keep her range pretty wide. I want her to be calling down with a lot of her weaker ace X, maybe floating me with some of her stronger Broadway hands like king jack, king queen, king 10, king 9. And even some of her pocket pairs that want to float me on the flop, including sixes through nines, and keep those in to see a turn. And
Is
also to
she
just
is she likely to check if she didn't connect with this board?
she's likely to check if she didn't connect with this board.
Okay.
Her check back range
So
is very, very weak.
so why did you size us so small?
I don't really want to be folding out some of her the bottom of her range, including even some of her air, because I've seen this player float very, very wide with some of her air balls, including like awful hands as bad as like Queen 7, King 7, Jack 10 offsuit. I've seen her float with again very, very weak passive calling station. And maybe I could have sized up for value here to about two-thirds extract value from, again, targeting those weaker ace-X
Hmm.
hands and even some of her second pair type hands on this board. So maybe I could have sized up for value here.
Yeah, I think you could have, given the fact that she is a very passive caller, right? She likes to float wide. This is a kind of a board that you're not going to like a lot of the turn cards, right?
Mhm, mhm,
So she's at 40 big she's 40 big blinds, right? So about $80 deep, right? And the pot is about $30 after the rake, about 28, 30. By you betting 10, and if you get a potential call, then the pot is 50. She's gone down from 80 to 60, right?
yeah. SPR is about 1.1.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's not so bad. Like it sets you up for a turn jam easily, right?
Mhm,
Let's say the turn card comes out uh pretty coordinated, a queen, jack, 10, 8, any heart, right? It kind of puts a lot of pressure on your hand, and you're gonna have
mhm.
to put the money in. At the same time, you don't want to set it up to where you fold out a lot of her middling hands, right?
Yeah.
Now, if you had bet at a minimum, I would have gone $15, a half pot size bet, right?
Mm,
By the time you get to the turn, the pot is 60. Now the SPR is below 1 to 1, right?
mhm,
Slightly below. That really sets up a nice jam for the
mhm.
turn. But I think yeah, I think it's better to go a little larger, especially against you going against somebody who's going to float wide. Get that value as much as you can and get yourself more options to put a lot of pressure on them, on the turn. Cool.
Yeah. I
I
didn't
assume
even
she called.
realize, as you mentioned, like, I didn't realize that how right you were as far as like, yeah, I'm not gonna like a lot of turn cards. Some two pair combos could catch up if she floats me with like hands like let's say ace five, ace four, ace seven, ace six. If any of those low cards come out, it's gonna be
Yeah.
a very, very sneaky two pair that I'm gonna be getting coolered a lot of the time. Whereas I could
She
just get
shouldn't.
extract value now from some of those weaker ace-X early on and just
Yeah.
play two street game and jam the turn.
In these kind of games, they shouldn't, but you often see them limp call with hands like 9-8, 9-10, king jack, king queen. offsuit, right?
Mhm.
They just pre-flop, they're so wide, right? And because of that, as you said, a lot of two pairs can get there on the turn, and and if they hit, if they hit a flush draw on the turn, they're typically not going away,
Yeah, yeah.
which you know um, presents its own challenges. But I assume she called.
Yeah, she calls.
All right, villain
Turn
calls.
card is 5 of clubs. Um, Now I think I make a mistake here when the small blind checks to me.
Did you check
I
back?
I did check back.
Oh, that's a mistake. Yeah,
Yeah. I
yeah,
should have been
yeah,
jamming this turn, especially because the SPR is about roughly like 1.1, 1.2.
yeah.
Um, I should just be jamming, denying any equity from this person realizing on the river, not giving them a free card to catch up. And again, just getting maximum pressure against a lot of those ace X hands that are going to be incentivized to call down pretty light here, and getting maximum value from those hands.
With this card, five of clubs, I don't know if jamming is the best option. It's a good option, but I don't know if it's the best option because,
Hmm.
like you said, um, ace five gets there a lot,
Yeah.
um, and the backdoor clubs get there, right? And with her flow check calling you on the flop, is she capped or uncapped?
On the flop.
Pre-flop, she check. She limp called, right?
Limp called. Very
And then
capped. Very capped.
yes, very capped. So, what does her range look like in this hand? I think she has a lot of weak aces in this hand.
Weak aces. Yeah.
Yeah, and with the weak aces, you could have backdoor flush draws in there. Rare, but possible.
She also could have some sticky king X, king jack, king
King
10.
Jack, King Queen.
Yeah.
Yeah. She doesn't have any ace king. She doesn't have any real
Yeah. No
value
ace
in there.
king. No
She
value.
she can she can have some middling pocket pairs like tens, jacks, you know, eights, fives get there. She
I just
she
get
can have a
there.
lot of fives. Yeah.
And that
So
was part of like what my thought process was is like, this is a pretty bad card for me. She did pick up some equity, and I think she has. I was unsure, and maybe I can ask this. Maybe she has the nut advantage, whereas I have the range advantage on this kind of board where she picked up a lot of equity with like some of those ace five, pocket fives, um, the occasional very, very weird king five suited hands that I might see her calling pre-flop with. Um, so yeah, that
yeah,
picked up some two
she
pair
she does have
combos.
the nut advantage. For that reason, I think I would have gone for a small bet
Yeah.
because by checking back, you're letting her to get a free card. You don't extract any value or information from her, right?
Mhm.
But with a small bet, I think I would have gone for a small bet.
I see.
You know, the pot is about 50, maybe a $15 bet, like
Yeah.
super small. Yeah, something like
Downsizing.
that. But it goes check, check, and then
Yeah.
the turn or the river.
And the river is the card that I really didn't want to see, which is the Jack of Hearts.
Well, the flush didn't get there, but, you know, Jack of Hearts is not that bad for you.
Yeah. It's not that
Uh,
bad, but Villain's action says otherwise when they lead into me for $30. Yeah.
Yeah, that puts in
Yeah.
that puts a lot of pressure on ace 10 off.
Yeah. I'm
Ace
not
Jack
loving the
got
spot.
there.
Ace
Yeah,
Jack
Ace
got
Jack got
there.
there. Queen 10 got there. You're losing to a lot of value. I mean, what bluffs can she have in this spot other than some random middling ace?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is turning showdown value into a bluff. But when have I seen players turn showdown
They
value
don't do
into a
that.
bluff at the
They don't
1-2?
do that. No, they don't do
Um,
that.
so I'm a little
What was her
frustrated in this spot.
sizing? Tell me. I'm sorry. $30 you said
$30
she.
into like roughly 50-ish, 60-ish. So it's around more than half pot bet.
That is so value heavy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and so I go into the tank for about a minute. I
Can
start table
she
talking. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Is she the kind of player that would do this just because you check back the turn?
No, no, this player just I had been observing her the entire night for, like, roughly 2 hours. She was not paying attention at all at the table. She had her headphones in, she was watching YouTube. Um,
Yeah.
so I think she's just playing her 2 cards very, very face up at this point.
Is she young?
Uh,
Is she old?
Middle age, like 30s,
Okay.
40s.
I
Um
I'll be honest with you. When I play against women, I'm very cautious at the table because in my experience, obviously there's a lot less women in the poker world than there are
Mhm,
men. They're a very
mhm.
small percentage. But the ones that are playing among men, they tend to be on average more solid than the
Yeah.
average male player, right?
That is something I
Yeah,
did notice as well.
yeah. So I am far more cautious, and for all of those reasons, I think you're in a world of hurt. And I think, God, I wish you had. If you had If you had a small turn bet, it would make your decision far easier on the
Yeah.
river facing this.
Yeah.
So tell me your thought process.
So my thought process, as you mentioned, I'm thinking about what her value hands here are a lot of the time. I don't think she's getting to the river here a lot with her queen 10. I think they'd probably end up actually no, I think it's because I didn't bet the turn. She could definitely be floating me with queen 10. Queen 10 gets there, king jack gets there. Ace jack was already beating me on the flop. Some of her weird two pair combos also just caught up. Um Her value range here is so narrow, but I just don't see any world for which she's finding a bluff here. None
There
of
is
the
no
draws
bluffs.
get there. None of the draws get there. And
Well, I mean,
again, when the action,
you had the straight draw that got
yeah,
there,
straight
but
draw.
other
Aside from
than
with like queen 10, but like
yeah,
I'm blocking some queen 10 there with ace 10. But again, this is also a very under bluffed line when the action goes check call, check back the turn, and lead the river. It out of position
it's
against an
just
in position
value.
player. It's just value.
It's yeah.
And so I
She was
also
hoping
do
that you would bet on the
yeah,
turn.
yeah.
Yeah.
And when I do a little bit of speech play. I say, big hand," and she doesn't say anything to me. And I stare her down for about a minute, and I, make a very frustrated fold.
Oh, I think that's a good fold. I think God, and a high percentage of the times you're just dead in that spot. You know,
Yeah.
she could have bluffed you up, but I would say 80% or more of the times you're
It's
just
value.
completely dead. Yeah, it's just value. Occasionally you wake up to some wild play, but at those levels, they don't find those
Kinds
really
of bluffs,
wild
yeah.
bluffs. Yeah. Did you ever get a reveal?
She showed me a jack.
Well, that's ace jack all day
Yeah.
or king
Yeah,
jack.
yeah.
Yeah, that's two pair or better. Yeah,
So
yeah.
I was like, I was happy when she showed me the jack. I was like, okay, yeah, yeah. She binked it. Definitely binked it. I
Cool.
think I played the hand I think I had really good instincts with the hand. I think I definitely misplayed the turn. Um, and I think I could have sized up in value on the flop
Yeah. Those are the
and just
two
played two
adjustments
street
I would
game.
say. Yeah, I think as you said, your instincts were good, but I think you missed some opportunity on the flop to get some value and put some pressure on, some middling aces. She happened to have a two pair or on the river, but like King Jack, that's a really good example, right? If she had King Jack, by sizing up a little bit on the flop, you put a lot of pressure on that hand. I think your flop bet was
Mhm,
$10, you said, right?
mhm.
Yeah. 20, that on that very, you know, uncoordinated. I mean, it's decently uncoordinated board. I think you put a lot of pressure on King Jack. Ace Jack, no, but yeah. And checking back the turn. No, I would continue to tell a story without putting a lot of pressure on your hand by going with a smaller bet, right?
Yeah.
And then, at that point, if she comes back with a $30, $40 bet on the river leading out, then it's very, very clear. It's an insta muck, right? Um, Luckily, you had good instincts to still fold on the river, but you made the decision tougher for yourself by checking back the turn. Yeah. Cool. Interesting hand.
Another hand. Um, oh, I like okay, so I really want to talk about this hand. I think it was a pretty easy hand overall, but I think I main question I want to talk about is uh utilizing exploitive speech play. And
Okay.
also a question about pre-flop with this particular hand. Uh we're about 50 big blinds effective. I'm 60 big blinds deep against a relatively younger player, late 20s, early 30s. Looks to be a solid reg, who's opening a pretty strong range preflop, as I've only been seeing him show down very strong Broadway and some middling pocket pairs, and has shown discipline post flop by folding a lot to aggression to some of the more recreational players.
Okay.
Um, so this player opens from under the gun to 15. I'm in position with king 10 suited, namely king 10 of diamonds
You're in what
and
position? Sorry.
button.
Okay.
Action folds over to me in the button. I call. I think it's a reasonable call. I thought about three betting this hand, but I think at the micro stakes at 1-2, I don't think three betting here is the best, mainly because Villain's opening raise size to 15 is just going to be very, very strong a lot of the time.
Why did you think you about three betting?
Um, I thought about playing a larger pot against a player that I think I can outmaneuver post flop a lot, but then I also realized that this isn't the best option or highest EV play because I can realize my equity a lot more in position and just play a multi-street game as opposed to just playing a one street game pre-flop and just getting all the money in. Because I don't think King 10 suited is a hand that I want to get all the money in, especially against a solid rig who's raise first in range is just going to be generally really strong in a small big blind structure. Because they're mostly opening very strong Broadway that's already going to be dominating me.
Tell me about small and big blind, the
Small
guys
and big
between
blind,
you.
passive players, same passive
Okay.
players. Um, and I thought it would be perfectly fine if they could get into the pot as well because it means more blinds for me, more big blinds for me to be playing for post flop, and I can always just get out of the way if these players show aggression post flop because again these guys are playing very face up.
All right. Fair enough. Do you think King 10 is a hand that plays in position better multi-way or heads up?
Better heads up.
Why?
I think again I can have a lot more dominant this is actually a good question. Because now this would be something for me to consider when what's the difference between like king 10 suited versus like jack 10 suited or 10-9 suited. I have a lot more ability to cooler some hands that are going to be continuing post flop, including some of those lower flush draws that these out of position players are going to be continuing with because they're just continuing so wide.
Hmm.
So when I do hit my flush, um actually, this sounds very silly. Huh.
Let's think about it like this, right?
This is no, no, it sounds very silly.
The
I
under
should
the gun
ask.
player, the under the gun player, right? You said
Mhm,
he's a regular solid player, right? So
mhm.
his opening range is pretty, you should be pretty narrow from under the gun, right? That has your king 10 fairly dominated most of the times. You're losing to all the ace king, all the king queens, queens, kings, aces, jacks, tens. He has all of those in his range, right? Um, so if you were to three bet in that spot, you're going to fold out most of
The
the
bottom of his
times
range.
the bottom of his range
And his
and the small
strongest
blind
part of his
and the
range.
big blind.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're going to continue against his stronger range, right? And he could float you with, the middle of his range as well, right?
Mhm.
And given the effective stack being only 50 big blinds, right? Now you're shallowing the SPR to where you're really limiting yourself to
Post flop, yeah.
post flop on the turn and the river, right?
Mhm.
Because if it goes check, check, then you're under repping your hand. And
Mhm.
if it goes bet call, the SPR is getting shallow. And what can you
Yeah, what can I
raise with
do?
on the flop? Let's say he bets, right? The best board that could come for you is king, king 10, right? And okay, yeah, he
Yeah.
bets, you raise, he folds, right? I think this is a hand that in position plays really well multi-way, right? And I like your call in that spot precisely because if the small blind and big blind come along, which you said they're passive players, it's actually better for you. It gives you a
Mhm.
lot more options, right? But at the very least, even if they fold and you just go heads up to the flop, you have a deep enough SPR, large enough SPR that allows you options
Yeah.
on the streets. I don't like three betting with that hand in that spot,
Yeah.
especially against the reg, who would only call with a range that's got you crushed.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just considering all the options, Cato, etcetera. Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. I don't like my instinct was to call. Especially with a
Your
really
instinct
strong
was
hand
right.
like King 10 suited.
Yeah, your instincts were right. I like it. Okay, so we're $30 plus the blinds uh to the flop of
The flop comes pretty nice. It is the ace of diamonds, seven of diamonds, and jack of clubs. So I flop a front door flush draw.
very nice.
On an ace high board is going to be favoring my thought process is that this is going to favor villain's range pretty well. He's going to have both the range advantage and nut advantage. He could definitely have aces here, just flop top
Yeah,
set.
yeah.
Ace king, ace queen is very, very happy here. Uh, his king queen, king jack are still going to be range betting a lot of the time here. Uh, and I think most of the time I'm just going to end up calling uh, with this flop. And as such, villain bets $20 into the pot, and I make the pretty easy call.
Okay.
Uh, the turn comes very, very
Let
nice.
let me
The
ask
four
you
of diamond.
this.
Oh, sorry.
Let, let me ask you this. What do you think of the villain's size? $20 into 30.
Sizing up with value here. He's trying to deny some equity to some of my flush draws. Getting value from worst ace X. Um, Again, just target. I believe this bet size is just targeting some of the worst ace X that he's dominating, and extracting value from some pocket pairs that want to see a turn card and or are floating him on the flop.
Mm-hmm. So he- after this turn bet, he has 70 behind, and the
Mhm.
pot is 70, right? So he's setting himself up
For a turn
for
jam.
a turn jam, right? Which
Mhm.
which screams value. I think he's hoping that if the turn is a complete brick, right, no diamond, he's gonna jam.
Mhm.
He should, right?
Yeah.
So I think his sizing is very value heavy, right?
Yeah, and that was the first thing I
Um,
did notice, that this is very value heavy.
yeah. I like your call, but you can't fold in that spot. And you definitely can raise. So I like your call, but it's important to be aware of that for what's coming
Yeah,
about his
yeah. I
sizing.
knew
Yeah,
if it didn't come a diamond on the turn, I think I would be in a really tough spot. Cause this SPR is so low. But I didn't think Villain was aware enough of the SPR. Just because I heard this Villain table talking earlier. They're mainly talking about like these old reg concepts of like betting for protection, these like scared poker concepts that I think are
right.
just out of the loop with like modern poker theory. And so I wasn't too afraid about like facing a turn jam and being put into a tough spot.
But that's a little different than what you described them as earlier. You described them as a pretty
Yeah,
solid
like
reg.
Well, I should maybe I shouldn't say solid reg, maybe weak
Yeah.
reg. I should say weak
Okay.
reg.
Okay. All right. That's more like it. All right.
Um, Turn, as I said, very beautiful card, 4 of diamonds. So
Four of
I have the
diamonds.
nuts.
Yep.
Um, Villain checks to me, and this is my question of whether I'm missing value here. Um, I decide to check back very
Oh,
very
why?
sneakily.
Why?
Uh, I don't want my hand to turn face up against the villain. And since the SPR is already won, I'm going to end up jamming most rivers for which aren't going to be a diamond, is my thought process.
Yeah, but if you check here on most rivers, he's gonna check back to you, right?
That is also true.
River's gonna go check. If you jam, he's definitely folding.
Hmm.
A lot of aces will fold in that spot, right? On this turn, I am really favoring a small bet, if anything, to induce.
A
A lot of players
raise.
get out of line,
Hmm.
with a small bet. At these levels, small bets are very viewed as weak, you know?
Hmm. Hmm.
Uh, so the pot is 70, $15 bet,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
It's almost a check, right? It could induce a raise, but it's almost a check. If he has any ace, he will float that $15, right?
Yeah.
And then you get to a $30 river pot where if it goes check and you jam, he's a lot more likely to call because at this point he has $50 behind, right? He's getting 4-1,
Hmm.
right? So if you just go small instead of checking back, you're going to get a lot more value on the turn and river. He will float, he will call you on the turn, and
Hmm.
on any river, an ace won't be able to get away. You get a lot more value
Yeah.
out of your hands, right?
I see.
The
I
only
see.
thing the only thing you could worry about is, board pairing against something silly like
Yeah.
jacks or sevens, but
Hmm.
checking the turn is giving up a lot of value in that spot.
Mm, I see. Yeah, because my thought process is so as long as the board didn't pair or no extra diamond comes, I was gonna get the money all in on the river, and I'd probably get snapped off a lot by some ace X and or some of his uh top set, top pair, top kicker, top pair solid kicker, ace king, ace queen, ace jack, top pocket aces, pocket kings even might snap me off here.
It depends on the SPR, right? Like the pot is
And the SPR is
70,
roughly like
but it's,
one. Roughly one.
yeah, roughly one, right? But so the pot is 70 and he has about 70 behind. That's
Yeah.
exactly one, right? But
Yeah.
if you went to the river with the SPR where the pot is 100 and he has 50 behind, you're definitely going to get
I'm definitely gonna get
called.
called. Yeah,
Yeah,
okay. I see it.
but
I
by a
didn't think
much
about
wider
that.
range. When you have the nuts, when you have a super strong made hand, right?
Mhm, mhm.
What's easier to put 15 in a pot of 85 because the pot is 70, you bet 15. He has to call 15 into an 85, right? With one card to come, potential improvement possibilities, right? Or put 70 into a pot of 140 when you're on the river and you have no potential for improvement,
Yeah.
right? So always help your opponent give you the money. Think about it in those terms,
Yeah.
right?
This makes sense.
Okay, so it goes check, check, and then river.
River's a complete brick with the 2 of spades.
2 of spades. Okay,
One checks.
of course.
And I ask him how much he has behind. I do all my hollering and hooting, and then I announce all in.
That's a tough call, right?
Yeah.
This is where I would go small. This on this river, since the turn goes check, again, make it easy for your opponent to hand you money. You just made it very hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. And typically at these levels of 1-2 loose passive games, they tend to float wide on the flop and the pre-flop and the flop, and they tighten up on the turn and the river progressively.
The range starts to merge on the turn and the river.
Yeah, the players just start tightening up for various different reasons. So your opportunity to extract value out of them, especially with a very nutted hand, is on those earlier streets, right? So this is a tough call for given the action. It's a very, very tough call. I would be shocked if he called you.
So I announce some speech play, and he starts tanking,
Yeah.
and I tell him your ace king is not good. So
Okay.
I start reverse pedaling the nuts, and I tell him ace queen's not good, sir. Ace king's not good, sir. And he looks at me very, very deeply,
Yeah.
and he says the magic words. I call
Oh, cool. Very cool. And
So-
what did he show?
ace king.
Ace king. Very cool. So speech play beautifully worked, right? Doesn't always work, and I really don't like speech play because it's very player dependent. You got to really know the player well, or you just have to luck out that you randomly picked the speech play that induced whatever action you wanted. Speech play is very, very, as in all live tales, right? It's very, very player dependent. You got to baseline them. Now you have a good baseline on this player, right? But if you don't, speech play is just a random shot in the dark. So just as many times as it's going to work out for you, it's probably not going to work out for you. So I tend to avoid it as much as I can, especially when I'm trying to induce an action, like uh, calling time. I'd like to put players in very uncomfortable spots. One of the things I believe in, your job is to make every decision for your opponent as uncomfortable as possible. That's how you make money, because when they're in uncomfortable spots, they tend to make more mistakes, and you make money when opponents make mistakes. And when I put my opponents in uncomfortable spots, they tend to tank a lot, especially at the higher stakes, right? And I let it go. I play in an environment. Some rooms are not like this, but in the room that I play normally, only the players in the hand can call time. The table can't call clock, right? Some other rooms, other players can call clock, but in cash games here, it's that way. So nobody can call clock on my opponent when they're in tanking, right? And I never do. I want them to take as much time as they can, because the longer the time it takes them to decide, the more likely they're going to land on the wrong decision, because The right decision is a very narrow channel. Typically, your options, let's say, you have 1,000 different options and, making a decision at any point, right? However you want to construct the narrative in your head to leads to calling or folding. Uh, Typically people end up on the wrong choice. And the more rope you give them in terms of options and time, the more likely they're going to end up on the wrong choice. So I personally don't do a lot of speech play unless I am put in a tough spot where I want to extract information from my opponent, right? Um, but I like it. I think your speech play saved your butt. However, I think a far more efficient line would be small bet, $15-$20 on the turn. Ace King would definitely float that or raise you, right? But definitely would float it. This player probably not. Uh, uh, but then, you jam on the turn. You don't need speech play. They just throw in the money a lot easier. I like it. I like the pre-flop. I like your call. The flop. I like your call. Just post flop on the turn and the river. Small adjustments.
Yep.
Very nice.
I think that is my biggest leak currently, namely missing value.
Um, it's a big leak for a lot of players, right? Pre-flop is really easy,
Yeah,
right?
pre-flop is pretty easy.
Pre-flop is pretty easy, especially if you're a patient player, which the 1-2 players, either people are or they're not. If they are, they wait for value. It's really easy to wait just for aces or kings and, play pre-flop. When you're dealing with relatively shallow stacks, like 50 big blinds, right? The game gets a little bit more convoluted and harder on subsequent streets, especially when there's a lot more money at risk, deeper stacks, deeper effective stacks. So it's common. It's something that you can work on. And uh, the way I want you to think about it is, and this is more advanced stuff, which is, uh, where you are. You need this kind of information. Pre-flop and to some degree on the flop, to a lot of degree on the flop, we try to play um, with a plan, right? That's why we have charts and uh, some sort of a strategy, right? Kind of like, do you play chess?
Yes.
Okay, so as a chess player, you study a lot of opening, right? Why do we do that?
Well, the common saying is we always want to be 3 steps ahead of our opponent.
Right, exactly. Uh, to give structure to, instead of trying to figure out every decision tree at the beginning of the game,
We already have a
we already have it. Because if we're trying to figure it out at the beginning, the decision tree by the end becomes really, really big, right? Because it exponentially grows, right? But if we have some set of openings in chess or in terms of poker, the charts, opening charts, right? Set of rules that we follow and we adjust around depending on the environment. That sets up a really good framework for pre-flop and flop play, right? But post-flop, we don't have any charts for it, right? We don't have any charts for turn and the river, right? So how do we figure that out?
That is a good question. Um, I think the way I've always tried to approach it is figuring out what board configurations are going to favor me on the turn in the river and how my position may affect what those board configurations are going to smash my range and give me good means to either barrel and or check my range on the turn in the river.
Right. The way I like to phrase it, the way I like to structure it is we figure out turn and river by trying to predict our opponent's likely range and action and go through the decision tree of, for example, what happens if it goes in this hand, right? The turn goes check, check, and the river goes check, uh, jam, or the river goes bet, call, or the river goes bet, jam, or the turn goes bet, jam versus the turn goes check, jam versus the turn goes check, small bet, call, river, check, jam, right? Just go through that exercise while you're in the hand. What happens if he does this and I do this, right? And then pick the line that's the most plus EV based on his possible range.
Yes.
Right? In this hand, it's a really easy exercise because you have the nuts, right?
Yes.
So it's easy to see how effective that exercise can be. It's a really good example. If it goes check, check, right? And the river goes check, jam, that's one possibility, right? So check, 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 jam versus bet, call, bet, jam. Huh? Yeah.
Versus bet. Yeah.
Bet, call, check, jam versus check, bet, small, check, jam versus check, bet, jam, call. Those are pretty much the majority of cases, right? So if it goes bet, call, bet, jam, right? That's one possibility. That's what happened, right? But let's think about what happens if it goes bet, call. He leads into you on the turn. Would you ever jam?
I think calling is perfectly fine.
Yeah, you would never jam. You have the nuts. Why would you jam?
Yeah. Yeah. Like I don't want to blow him off his ace king.
Exactly. So it would go bet, call, and then river goes check, jam. Is that more likely to extract value versus the line that you took?
I think the line that you just mentioned would extract a lot more EV.
Yeah, but that's a line that you need his assistance in. He needs to bet into you for you to call.
Yeah. And in this case, the line that would have probably been the most highest EV was the one that we went through, which is when he goes check, bet small,
Right. Exactly.
call, and
The,
then river check, bet, jam.
yeah. And the other possibility could be check, bet, and he jams into you and then you call. That's easy as well. But in those two scenarios, you don't have control over his action. In one of the alternatives, it was bet, call, check, jam. He needs to bet and you need to call. In the other possibility was check, bet, jam, call. He needs to jam on the river for you to call. You don't have control over that, right?
Yeah.
So the line that's most plus EV that you have control over becomes check, bet, small, jam, call. Or check, bet, small, check, jam.
Yeah.
Right? So this is how I want you to start thinking about the decision tree post flop,
I see.
right? Go through these scenarios in your head. What happens if, you know, what happens if he bets small and I bet a small size versus a medium size versus jamming and then subsequently on the river, you know?
Yeah.
Just go through that exercise every hand and it makes it highlights the most plus EV lines in your decision process.
Yeah. I think I'm trying my best to encapsulate that whenever I go through like Cato, when I consider all the options of whether I should go check,
What's Cato?
fold. Oh, this is a concept from like Hungry Horse, which is to consider all the options.
Okay.
Um, whether it
I
be
wasn't familiar
raise,
with it.
jam. Yeah.
Yeah.
Raise, fold, jam, call. I try to do all of that. Whether I raise really large, raise really small, uh,
Do you
bet
do
my
it?
pot.
Do you do it in multi-street or do you just focus on the current street?
I focus on multi streets.
Okay, that's the way
So
to do
I'm
it.
also planning like what turn cards are going to favor me, whether I'm going to be jamming a lot of these turn cards, whether I'm going to be checking on certain turn cards, um, and or just continuing to range bet when a certain card helps me.
Cool. Yeah. Think about it in like in those terms. Think about pre-flop and flop, kind of like opening chess movements.
Mhm.
Once you get into the game, now you're predicting the future, but with a far less smaller decision tree than you would have to if you started with a decision tree at the beginning, right? Does
Mhm.
that kind of make sense?
Yeah, I think I need more hands in order to kind of really dial in on these decision making.
Hmm.
Just because I don't think I have a repeatable thought process in the manner of like, okay, which decision tree is going to be the highest EV play? As opposed to what I currently have now, which is I'm figuring out, okay, these are some of the highest EV plays among these three or and many decision tree.
Right.
Um, and usually I end up picking the one that's best on instinct, but obviously there are some better plays that I can incorporate.
Instinct is rarely wrong. It's a good starting point when you don't have a process, right? But once you develop a process and what we talked about, just thinking about those spots in the way that we just spoke about will give you a pretty good process, and you build on it on your own terms. uh, you will develop once you develop this process. You don't want to. You'll get away from acting on instinct, which is what you don't want to do, because instinct is rarely right. This is not a very instinctive game. That's why the edges are huge if you can develop them.
I guess I could ask about oh, maybe one of my micro sticks hands uh at NL20.
All right, let's hear that.
So we're $20 effective. Um I have King Deuce of clubs in the big blind against an in position raise to $1.60.
Big blind, in position raise, so your heads up.
Yes. Every action folds over to me in the big blind, I call. Player type,
That
it's a friend
you
of
have
mine.
king deuce of clubs,
Yes.
all right, and
It's a questionable call.
and you're playing 10-20 cents.
10-20 cents, yeah.
All right, so it's a relatively large eight big blind raise,
Hmm.
and you call with a very speculative king deuce of clubs. Okay.
Yeah. Um, player's a tag style. Um, although player isn't necessarily exploitive and has a lot of leaks as far as like saying, "Oh, I need to balance my range. What's some bluffs?" Even though like one necessarily doesn't need to do that, these micro sticks, and that they should just be exploiting players at the table by playing a linear range and playing in position against hands that they're going to be dominating, getting value from them.
Mm-hmm.
And so, villain can be raising me with a polar range here. Is my thought process. Is this can be a lot of very nutted hands, jacks plus, some 6-7 suited, 8-9 suited. But I've also seen them raise with a lot of very questionable hands. like ace nine offsuit, ace eight offsuit, ace seven offsuit. They overvalue a lot of their ace X and king X offsuit hands.
Fair enough. All of that is correct. He's you said he's 20 big blinds effective, right?
Not 20 big blinds effect, $20.
$20 effective. Okay, so yeah, all right. So he's 200 big blinds effective. So you're fairly deep. All right. Uh, the king deuce is really at the bottom of your range.
Yeah, this is the
right?
bottom of my.
Yeah. So regardless of what his range is, right? You
Mhm.
you're playing a very speculative hand that you need to make a hand. All right. So you call 320, 330. You said no, it's a no reg
Yep.
game, so 330 to the flop.
And the flop comes 10 of hearts and 3 4 of clubs.
3 4 of clubs.
So I have a front door flush draw, and this is a 10 high board. This can hit him with some of his ace 10, king 10, queen 10, jack 10. Although
Is he
his
you
more nutted hands,
is he on the button or the cutoff?
he's in the button.
He's on the button. Okay.
His nutted hands here include pocket tens, pocket aces, pocket kings, pocket queens, pocket jacks. Although he's going to be doing this with all of his Broadway. I've seen this player see that with his entire range.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I thought about check raising here. Um, Mainly because he's going to have to fold a lot of his Broadway hands and continue with some of his stronger hands, including pocket jacks through aces. But I don't really want to be check raising into a range that is going to be continuing very strong. Um, just because his range just is so nutted. Um, so I decide to just check with the intention of calling.
I think that's your best course of action. You know, if you imagine it goes check, bet, raise, jam. What do you do?
Yeah, and that's the spot that I would be very afraid of, and then I have to fold on that
Right?
equity here.
Yeah, you don't want to put yourself in that spot. If you bet and he raises, that's a tough spot, right?
Yeah.
Worse is if you know, actually it's not that bad. If you bet and he jams, it's a fairly easy fold, but you give up equity either way. So I think your best line is check call, depending on
Yeah.
his sizing. What did he bet? I
He
imagine he
goes
did.
for a very standard continuation bet of about $2. So he sizes up to about
Two
uh
thirds.
2/3.
Yeah, roughly. A little less. All right. And I imagine you just
I call.
flick the go. All right.
The turn is an interesting card,
Yeah.
and it is the king of spades.
All right.
So I do pick up some equity here. I'm ahead of a lot of his queens and jacks and ten. Well, not tens. Some of his pocket nines. I think he's going to be doing a lot of checking with some of his more speculative hands, including like 9-8, 7-6.
I don't think he
Um,
has a lot of those in his
yeah, he
range.
doesn't have a lot. The worst in the bottom of his range includes some of his jack 10, 9-10, for which is probably just want to see a cheap river. Um, when seeing this turn card, which is going to hit me when I'm continuing. Um, so my thought process is I'm going to be checking here with my entire range, and I'm going to be going check call to reevaluate on the river.
I think
Because
you have no choice but to check here.
yeah, villain could still be barreling with a lot of his missed Broadway, including ace queen, ace jack, ace nine.
Yeah. Hero
Uh,
checks, villain.
Villain barrels for 4.
And you, sir?
I find a call.
You find a call. Now we get to a river with 1530 in the
Mhm.
pot and started
The
with
river
20.
is interesting card. The King of Diamonds.
All right.
So I pick up trips. I'm still dominated by a lot of his Broadway, like King Queen, King Jack, Ace King, but I'm blocking a lot of those very nutted value hands and a lot of his thicker value hands, including pocket aces, pocket queens, and pocket nines, just lost a lot of value.
Yeah.
And I think this is actually a really good river card for me because I'm blocking ace king, king queen, king jack. Um, and I think I'm gonna get paid here a lot of the time. When he just has a thick value hand like pocket aces, pocket queens, pocket jacks. And if he just boats up here, he's gonna end up jamming here with pocket tens, with the SPR being like roughly one for me.
Right.
Um, so I'm not too afraid. I think I'm just gonna end up going check call here a lot of the time, depending on what his action is. So I check.
Yeah, I don't think this is a river that you can lead into at all. I think check calling is again your only option because if you lead into it, right, you have to go really small to get any value from those, random broadways. And if you go larger, you just get snapped off by a range that has you crushed, right? And
Mhm,
only and another king would call you, which has you crushed, right?
mhm,
But if you check and he bets super small, you could call or you jam, or if he bets big, it's an easy call for you. Yeah, I think as far as EV goes, yeah, you're gonna get a lot more value out of this hand by just check calling in this spot.
yeah.
And
Um, Villain bets pretty large for about pot at $13.
hmm, yeah, so he basically almost jams,
Yeah,
leaving
so
himself a little behind.
I'm not in the best spot. I'm
No, you're
obviously
not.
losing to pocket tens, ace king, king queen, king jack. But again, I blocked a lot of those, and I started doing the math. What are his bluffs here? What are his thick value hands that I'm owning here? Pocket aces, yes. Or choose two number of combos of pocket aces. Um, four choose two combos of pocket queens. Same
Yeah.
with pocket jacks. Um, and he only has like what, four combos of king queen, king jack. So that's like eight
And
and like
and and the other thing
basically,
and the other thing you have to think about, like, let's say he has a very let's say he has ace king, king queen, right?
yeah.
Is that the kind of hand that wants to go that size in that spot?
No, which is my
Exactly.
thought. Like, what is he targeting here?
Yeah. So
I
you
don't think he thinks that I have a king here.
yeah, so you
If
can
he's trying to get a draw to fold here,
yeah, just by his sizing, you can discount a lot of times that he doesn't have a king.
yeah,
The only
which is my
re-
thought process.
yeah,
The sizing just doesn't make sense to me.
the only real value you're losing to is here is pocket tens. So that's a
Yeah,
yeah, you have to flick it in.
yeah. And so I do the math in my head. The sizing doesn't make sense. In addition to like, there's just so many extra combos of bluffs and values that I'm just beating here.
Yeah.
I flick in the call. If he says, "Good call,"
Yeah. It was a great
um,
call. Yeah.
and he later shows me pocket queens.
Makes sense. Makes perfect sense. Um, you got very lucky, but as you said, it was a speculative hand. The fact that, it was 200 big blind, I can get behind, you know, calling out of position pre-flop with king deuce clubs. But, let's say you were 50, big blinds deep.
Yeah, no, I would not be
Yeah,
calling with
yeah,
king deuce of
exactly.
clubs.
Yeah, I think that's well played. Yeah, very nicely done. Cool, man. Great. The fact that he, and this is kind of a live tell thing, the fact that he left himself a little behind, you know,
Yeah.
that kind of indicates a weak hand to me a lot of times as well, because he's not doing any math at that point in his head. It's kind of
Yeah.
like panic mode. It's fight or flight, right? He just, yeah, not a whole lot of thought has been put in there. And, obviously there's timing tells in that as well. We didn't talk about that, but that dependent on a lot of factors. But yeah, well played. I like it. I like it a lot. Um,
Got it. Thank you, Vinton.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Yeah, good to hear from you. Ciao.
Yeah.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.